and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert. I'm Julia Alberg-Burbank, your worship associate for today. As we begin, we acknowledge that we are on the historic homelands of the various bands of Cahuilla people, and we honor the unique relationship that we hope emerges between our community and the indigenous people in their traditional territories. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Cahuilla people whose lands and water we benefit from today. In this congregation, we welcome people of all sexual orientations and gender identities, of all ages and sizes. People of all economic statuses and professions, of all physical or mental abilities. People of all races and ancestries and cultures. We welcome you wherever you come from, whoever you love, whatever your immigration status or civic engagement. We welcome all those who will learn and grow with us as we commit together to embrace the rich and beautiful diversity of the world and to build a community centered in justice, compassion, and love. You are welcome here. We're glad you're with us this morning. We'd like to take a moment now to greet newcomers and visitors. If you're here for the first time and are comfortable, you're invited to stand or raise your hand, and Bill will come around with a microphone. Right now, please just share your name and where you're from, and after the service, we'd like to get to know you better at coffee hour. We have anybody today?
I'm new. My name is Lou, and I'm
So if you would like to be on our email list to keep up on announcements and happenings here in our congregation and to learn more about us and our programming, please contact us at admin, ADMIN, at uucod.org. And now, let's ring our Tibetan bowl to begin our service and then listen to our music for centering.
Good morning again, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert. I am the Reverend Ian Riddell, and I have the honor and delight of serving this congregation as its minister. However you found us, however many times you've been here with us in person or online, welcome. We are a congregation and tradition that celebrates the richness and beauty of individual lives and commits to working together to weave a tapestry made stronger and more vibrant by our collaboration and by the sharing of our lives and our visions for a thriving future for all life. We strive together to build the beloved community of resilience, hope, and love in the face of fear and apathy. We practice the opening of hearts, the working of hands, and the lifting of spirits in the service of love. We begin our service today with the words of Allison Wohler. With thankful hearts, we come together this morning to celebrate the bounty of the day, to bask in the warmth of this community, to share with friends the tides of our lives, to entertain perennially our hope for a better future. We join together this morning, as always, to resist injustice and inequality wherever they may be found, in our world or in our hearts. And our hearts are touched by the human need that we feel around us, whether far away or within the touch of our hand. We come here to be together because this is how we believe our lives are best lived, in questioning and in conversation, in compassion and in service, in gratitude and in joy, in companionship and in love. It is good to be together with you this morning. And let's continue that goodness by rising, please, in body or in spirit as we sing together our opening hymn, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
Please join me in the words on the screen as we light our chalice. May love be the spirit of this church. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to help one another in fellowship, this is our aspiration. Please join me as Tom Burbank lights a biopoc candle for us. As they journey together towards spiritual wholeness. May we, as a beloved community, work to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression. May we live out our principles so that justice, dignity, and equity for all prevail. I'd like to share a reading this morning called Human Conversation. From Turning to One Another, Simple Conversations to Restore Hope to the Future by Margaret J. Wheatley. People are the solution to the problems that confront us. Technology is not the solution, although it can help. We are the solution. We, as generous, open-hearted people who want to use our creativity and caring on behalf of other human beings and all life. Relationships are all there is. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything in the universe only exists because it is in relationship to everything else. We have to stop pretending we are individuals who can go it alone. We humans want to be together. We isolate ourselves when we're hurt by others, but alone is not our natural state. Today, we live in an unnatural state, separating ourselves rather than being together. Human conversation is the most ancient and easiest way to cultivate the conditions for change, personal change, community and organizational change, indeed planetary change. For as long as we've been around as humans, as wandering bands of nomads or cave dwellers, we've sat together and shared experiences. We've painted images on rock walls, recounted dreams and visions, told stories of the day, and generally felt comforted to be in the world together. When the world became fearsome, we came together. When the world called us to explore its edges, we journeyed together. Whatever we did it together. We have never wanted to be alone, but today we are alone. We are more fragmented and isolated from one another than ever before. Archbishop Desmond Tutu describes it as a radical brokenness in all of existence. We move at frantic speed, spinning out into greater isolation. We seek consolation in everything except each other. The entire world seems hypnotized in the wrong direction, encouraging us to love things rather than people, to embrace everything new without noticing what's lost or wrong, to choose fear instead of peace. We promise ourselves everything except each other. We've forgotten the source of true contentment and well-being. The simplest way to begin finding each other again is to start talking about what we care about. I'd like to invite our ushers forward for our offertory, and I thank you in advance for your generosity.
Holding in our hearts all of those, especially who do not have the luck, do not have the privilege of coming indoors on a day like this. all of those for whom a day like this is extra challenge. We call to mind all of those in our lives who are in need of help, in need of wellness, in need of something. We hold those people in our hearts, even and especially if those people are us. We hold all those in our hearts, those who fight daily for justice, who fight for the survival of others, who fight for the triumph of love in the world, even and especially if those people who are fighting are us. We hold in our hearts all those who are at the wrong end of hatred, all those who suffer from other people's anger, who suffer from other people's intolerance, who suffer from other people's vision of a small, controlled, limited world where love is rationed. We share love in our hearts for all of those, the wrong end of that hatred, even and especially if those people are us. And we share today together, we hold in our hearts today together all the members of our families, of our communities, of our structures of life, all those who support us and feed us, who clothe us, who make our lives easier, who make our lives more challenging. All of those we live in relationship and community with, we hold in our hearts together as we pause in silence in the presence of each other and of the love that holds and nurtures and inspires and fires our hearts. In the presence of that love, we pause in quiet together. May all beings know peace. May all beings know an end to suffering. May all beings know love. We join your voices together as we sing our hymns for meditation, Spirit of Life, Fuente de Amor.
Oh
African-American poet Elizabeth Alexander ends her poem called Ars Poetica number 100, I Believe, with these words. Poetry is what you find in the dirt in the corner. Over here on the bus, God in the details, the only way to get from here to there. Poetry, and now my voice is rising, is not all love, 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 and I'm sorry the dog died. Poetry, here I hear myself loudest, is the human voice. And are we not of interest to each other? This question, are we not of interest to each other, has been in my heart a lot lately as I read the news and follow postings on social media. Alexander's question troubles me. It unsettles my mind and my heart as I wonder how we might get through these times, how we might adapt and learn as individuals and as a society how to actually live together in ways that are just and loving and sustainable for the thriving of life on this planet. When I'm unsettled, I'm not sure if this is true for all of us, but when I'm unsettled, I try my hardest to stay in that place of uncertainty for a while and not rush to certainty too quickly. Certainty might feel more comfortable, but it's not always a place of creativity or connection or openness. Now, I first heard Elizabeth Alexander read her poetry at Barack Obama's first inauguration in 2009. And then again, a while later, she was interviewed by Krista Tippett on her radio show, which is now a podcast. Then it was called Speaking of Faith, and now it is called On Being. Each episode, if you haven't heard it before, each episode, Krista Tippett, who was trained as a diplomat and studied theology later in life, sits and has a long, rich, and wide-ranging conversation about faith and understanding and human connection and exploration. She invariably begins each of these conversations by asking her guest what role faith played in their childhood and growing their dialogue from there, out of that grounding. It's always been a favorite of mine. I listened to it a lot in past years. In fact, there was one day I was preaching, and I thought, that doesn't sound like my way of speaking. I wonder who that could be. And it was Krista Tippett. And a lot of other Unitarian Universalists, it seems, listen or have listened to her podcast. She has said that a poll of her listeners told them, her team, that about 9 or 10% of the listeners to their show were Unitarian Universalists, significantly higher than our percentage in the population at large. For Tippett, conversation is at the heart of learning and growth and change. A while ago, she and others created the Civil Conversations Project, aimed at featuring thinkers and movers and shakers who were actually talking to one another, with one another, and also for building the skill of conversation in the general population. In 2016, June of 2016, it was just after the Pulse nightclub shooting and in the alarming run-up to the 2016 presidential election, Krista Tippett spoke at the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly. She was the Ware Lecturer for the year. In her presentation, Tippett uplifted the idea that one of the things that we needed in our complex, conflictual society was to nourish the practice of collective and individual discernment, to learn the art together of starting new conversations. She called for us to understand listening to each other, to our neighbors, to those who we might call enemy, listening as a social act, a social art, to be explored, nurtured, and practiced daily. Inspired by that poem of Elizabeth Alexander that I shared with you a little while ago, she invited us into the practice of searching for what is at stake for all of us. If we are to be interested in each other, what is important to all of us? And at the heart of that exploration and searching is the art, skill, and practice of conversation. I recently traveled to Seattle on vacation, and part of the trip was visiting with an old friend and meeting a newer friend in person for the first time. He's one of the guys in my weekly Zoom knitting group that has been meeting for the past 3 years. We know each other pretty well, but it was wonderful to spend time in person, talking and listening and knitting together. And then he and I and about 25 other guys headed to a retreat center south of Seattle for the Pacific Northwest Fall Knitting Retreat, men's knitting retreat. These gatherings of men who knit and crochet and weave and spin yarn have been going on for more than a decade, but this was the first time I've attended, and I know I told many of you how excited I was about getting to go, and it was wonderful. For 3 days, we sat and knitted together. That's what we did. Either in the large meeting room we took over, or in the pagoda, or on the benches down near the Puget Sound. There was a lot of knitting, and a lot of talking about knitting, sharing tips, offering compliments and suggestions, comparing yarn, buying yarn. Lots of knitting, yes, but even more conversation. And not just about knitting. There were guys there I'd never met before, more guys from my Zoom knitting group who I was meeting in person for the first time, and one person who I'd known for 30 years, but I had only seen once in person in the last 20. We shared stories of our lives. We talked about our work and our families. We talked about our fears and hopes for our communities. We talked and listened and sat together. We made a point of taking time out of our lives to be together. There was no rushing, no agenda other than hanging out together. It was the knitting that brought us, there, but for me, I came away refreshed and renewed and hopeful because of the conversations. Some of those conversations have continued through texting and social media, and I'm delighted to have some new friends, some new conversation partners in the days and weeks ahead, people I would never have known about, people whose lives I would never have known about had we not sat together and talked, been conversation partners. I want to share another story about another conversation partner I had who had a profound impact on my life. His name was Larry, and he was a member of the Las Vegas Unitarian congregation throughout my time there. He passed away in 2017, and since then I've thought a lot about him and about the hours of conversations we had. Now, I have a habit of calling men who are older than I am sir. I think I got away with calling Larry sir once. He was having none of that. You see, it wasn't very long after I met him, probably in our first conversation, that Larry informed me that he was a communist. Not a socialist, but a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. When I responded to this news with curiosity, he regaled me with stories of party intrigue and doctrinal struggle. He would have none of this hierarchical sir stuff from me. And so I came to call him comrade. And he would smile at me every time I did. Larry was also a retired United Church of Christ minister, and he shared stories of that part of his life with me regularly as well. Tales of his various ministries in communities on the mainland and in Hawaii. And he asked me about my journey to ministry and the communities I'd served and been part of. He usually did a really good job of trying not to give this then newly minted minister advice on being a pastor, but every once in a while something would pop out. It was a blessing to me to know that I was seen and loved by this man, a gift to share the bond of ministry. And Larry came to call me kahu, which is Hawaiian for pastor or shepherd. And I would smile at him every time he did. In our conversation, Larry didn't just share stories of his past with me because he enjoyed it. He struggled with memory and history. The weight of the past sat heavy on his shoulders and in his heart. He was committed to a searing self-examination and wrestling with his success and his failings. It was a profound honor to be invited by him to bear witness and be companion on this quest. And he seemed deeply grateful to be able to share these conversations with someone who strove to listen with love and curiosity. We do holy work, friends, when we share the bare truth of our reality, when we see it clearly and we share it honestly with those we love. We do holy work when we see and hear each other with love and with acceptance. Larry shared the joys of his life along with the struggles, and Larry listened to and cherished the joys in the lives of those he loved. We did all this through conversation, over coffee, in the car, on the way to meetings, in my office, at the church. Many conversations where we showed up with our curiosity and our open hearts and listened to each other and shared of ourselves. Though he is gone, I carry my comrade and our conversations in my heart, and am so grateful for his presence in my life and for that model of learning each other through conversation. Learning and relearning how to have conversations with each other, with those who we share life with those who we don't yet know or understand, learning and relearning how to have conversations, how to talk with one another is central to the practices explored and promoted by thinkers and writers in very different fields and ways of thinking. In her book, Turning to One Another, which Julia read an excerpt from earlier today, Margaret J. Wheatley shares and explores her conviction that returning to the practice of conversation is essential for change, for justice, and for surviving the world today. It takes courage to start a new conversation, she writes. But if we don't start talking to one another, nothing will change. Conversation is the way we discover how to transform our world together. We also discover that we were never as separate as we thought. It is how we think together as human beings. Over and over again in the book, she relates the story of a social movement, powerful social movements that were started by, my friend and I sat down and started talking. Wheatley thinks that we can't just dive into conversation, though, that we need to nurture ways of being, practices of getting ourselves ready to have real, useful, connective conversation. She invites us to acknowledge one another as equals, to try to stay curious about each other, to slow down so we have time to think and reflect. We need to recognize that we need each other's help to become better listeners. And she is very clear that we need to get ourselves okay with the fact that it's going to be messy at times, perhaps a lot. She lays out some questions she thinks will help us bring conscious and meaningful change to our lives through conversation. Questions such as, what is my faith in the future? What am I willing to notice in my world? Am I willing to reclaim time to think? What is the relationship I want with the earth? When do I experience the sacred? What is our role in creating change? Wheatley's way of thinking about conversation and their power, those questions I just shared, make me think of our chalice circles, those small groups of us who gather each month and share parts of our lives together. Our chalice circles gather under a covenant that invites participants to engage in conscious practice around the way we talk to one another in a circle. And our circles invite us into questions reflecting on our lives and how spirit plays a part in the day-to-dayness of those lives. They invite us to share deeply and to listen even more deeply to each other, just like Mel shared with you earlier. In all the congregations I've been a part of, including this one, I have heard over and over again how chalice circles have brought connection and depth of awareness and compassion to those who participate wholeheartedly. I'm grateful Mel shared today about her experience, and I'd invite you to ask her and the folks who will be around after service. I think Stephen is here as well, who's one of our chalice circle leaders, if you might like to get involved in a chalice circle this year. Now, sometimes, though, the conversations we have are not so high level as wondering together how we can survive, or so existential as our relationship with the earth. Sometimes we need to have conversations about specific things that have happened, conversations within defined relationships, whether they be family or workplace or in a congregational community. Sometimes we need to talk about something tricky, something that will impact how we work or live together with other people in our lives. The group of authors who call this collectively crucial conversation, these conversations crucial conversations, they are conversations where there is something at stake, something important is going on, and they're conversations where we're a little concerned about how they might go. We have some nerve around them. They are important, but they're also a little frightening sometimes. Now, Crucial Conversations is a business book. In many ways, it's oriented to making the outcome of crucial conversations more productive, better working environments, better relationship between co-workers, but also better relationships among family members and friends. There is a lot in this book, but three of the things they lift up as practices for going into these difficult, crucial conversations is that we be very clear about what the outcome is that we want. And what they say is rather than going into a conversation with, I need to prove that I'm right, or I need to prove that you're wrong, or I need to tell you how much you hurt me so you'll feel bad about it. They say that the goal of a conversation, one of these conversations should be, for them anyway, expanding the pool of shared meaning, expanding the pool of common understanding, not necessarily finding common ground, but expanding the pool of common understanding, understanding each other and the situation more clearly together. They invite us to start with heart, which means for them, I think, inviting us to come to the conversation with openness and curiosity. We may be angry, we may be hurt, we may be worried. Those are real things. But if we can choose to come to the conversation ready to tell our story, but with heart and curiosity, things might go better, they think. And then come to the conversation with an awareness of what story we're telling about what happened, and understanding that that is our story about what happened. There's a lot in this book that is really powerful and meaningful, and I will be leading a class, 3-session class, starting in a few weeks, about crucial conversations and our covenanted community, and I invite you to join me for that. There's information about that in the newsletter, but even if you don't do that, I highly recommend this book, and I'll share information about it in my post-sermon reading list, which I continue to do. So it seems over and over again, I need to say this here, these past months that I've implored you to not hear the things I'm saying as asking or telling you to be nice to people who are actively trying to dismantle our democracy and actively trying to dehumanize and destroy the lives of our neighbors and kin. I am not saying that the solution to all of our problems in the here and now is just to chat more with those who are screaming hate. But sitting down and talking with our family members, our neighbors, our fellow congregants can have huge transformative power. It can bring solidarity and sustenance to our lives. It can remind us who we are and help us to learn better who our neighbors are. It can help us know more deeply and precisely what we're fighting for and who we're fighting for and who our allies are in that fight. I spoke with you over the summer about the work of Timothy Snyder and especially his book on tyranny. Snyder offers multiple ways that we can choose in our daily lives as regular citizens, ways we can choose to act that will help us and others resist the spread of tyranny and fascism. And one of those ways, he says, is to make eye contact and small talk. We do this, he says, not just to be nice and kind to each other, but to learn more about each other in the best of ways so that we know our neighbors and fellow citizens better and can understand better the particularities of their lives, what their struggles are, where their hurts are, what their fears are, so that we have that knowledge in our hearts when we make decisions. And also in harder ways so that we know where our allies are. We know who we might rely on in difficult times. We know where our support is. Having old friends is the politics of last resort, he said, and making new ones is the first step toward change. Our Unitarian Universalist principles invite us into a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and they admonish us to encourage spiritual growth in us and in our congregations. Learning the art of conversation, practicing how to have conversations with each other, taking the time to sit down or stand and to talk with each other, to build relationships where we can be vulnerable and we can share with each other our hopes, share with each other the story of our lives, share with each other what worries us, where we can learn from each other what is important to call each other, what shall we call each other in our lives. These are the crucial meanings and reasons for us to develop the practice of conversation. I hope that you will take in your heart these admonitions, these requests, these suggestions, these examples of conversation as ways to build connection, to deepen our compassion to each other, to know each other more clearly, so that we can live together and strive together for a world of love and justice and hope. May it be so. And so we can build bridges with each other, in fact. And so I invite you please to rise in body or in spirit, and we'll sing together Building Bridges. If you're looking for it in the teal hymnal, it's number 1023, but the words will be on the screen. Please rise in body or spirit. We'll sing it twice through in unison together, and then I'm going to split you down the middle, and we're going to sing it as a round to each other. Okay?
Please join me in the words on the screen as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I often have something pithy and powerful to say as closing words, but I've been so inspired by the writers I share with you today, I want to share some of their words as closing words for you to carry with you in your hearts. Elizabeth Alexander asks, are we not of interest to each other? Krista Tippett asks us to relearn the art of conversation to invite searching on what is at stake for all of us. And Margaret Wheatley reminds us that conversation is the way we discover how to transform our world. My friends, may the weeks, days, and months ahead be full of conversations where you choose to understand that we are of interest to each other, where you understand more and more deeply the stakes in each other's lives, and where we together build change through connection, starting one-on-one as we talk with each other. Go in peace, my friends, to love and serve the world.
Is this your son's birthday that